Have you felt that chill in the air? Meteorological winter is here. But what if I told you this massive storm we're seeing right now is just the opening act for something much colder? If you want the full breakdown on this current system, I've dropped a link for you right in the description below. But the real story, the one that could affect millions more, is what comes after this storm. The entire pattern is shifting colder, and when I reveal the view from the North Pole, you'll see exactly why. That map is the key, so stick around. It's going to make everything clear. Well, maybe not everything, but it will definitely show you the chilling truth of what's ahead. First, let's look at the problem we've been dealing with in November. We are on the verge of a colossal pattern flip. It's been relatively cold in the Northeast, but what's coming is on a whole different level. And I'm convinced this is where the floodgates open, unleashing shot after shot of cold air, even plunging deep into the south. Are you prepared for that? All right, here it is, the view from the top of the world. Right here is the North Pole, but the real monster in the room is this gigantic reservoir of Arctic air building over Siberia. And it's not alone. We're seeing another huge pool of frigid air growing over the Northwest Territories in Alaska, as those regions plunge into near total darkness. With an incredibly low sun angle and a growing snowpack across much of Canada, you're looking at a perfect factory for generating bitter cold. And while I know not all of my Canadian friends have been buried in snow just yet, the machine is definitely running. But here's the critical part. That cold is stockpiling, and the upper level pattern is about to unlock the door and send it south, paving the way for a frigid December. We're not talking about one cold snap. We're talking about multiple Arctic invasions that will set the stage for major winter storms. We've been tracking this possibility for what feels like a month, and now, in the first week of December, it is all coming true. The early signs are undeniable. Now for a wild plot twist, the trigger isn't on the ground. It's miles above us. A sudden stratospheric warming event is happening right now, way up at 30 millibars. And when the stratosphere warms, it violently disrupts the polar vortex. When that happens, it sends a shock wave through the weather patterns across the entire northern hemisphere. And we are witnessing that reaction in real time as that displaced Arctic air begins to spill down into North America. Don't miss the next part. It's crucial. We can pinpoint exactly where this cold air is by looking at tropopause temperatures. That's the boundary at the very top of the troposphere. It's right where the stratosphere begins, about the same altitude where commercial jets cruise. And look at this. You can see that cold core of air spinning over Hudson Bay. But notice what's missing? It's not over the North Pole. In fact, you've got another piece breaking away over Siberia. This is the split we've been warning you about. What does it mean? It means the heart of the Arctic is now parked much closer to the United States. It becomes incredibly easy to see how that frigid air is going to want to take a nosedive straight south into North America. Now, I'm a huge believer in analog forecasting. If you're not familiar, it's like using history to predict the future by finding years with a nearly identical weather setup to what we have now. For instance, let's look at 1983. And I have to give credit where credit is due. Joey over at Weatherbell pointed this out, and when I checked the data, he was dead on. We had a sudden stratospheric warming event in November of 1983, just like today. Before it hit, conditions were actually warm, or at least close to normal. And then, as they moved into December, can you guess what happened? Bang! The bottom fell out in many of the same areas that are about to turn cold for us over the next couple of weeks. Now keep in mind, this map shows the average for the whole month. It doesn't mean there weren't some milder days mixed in. And look, the cold lingered right into January for a huge part of the East. I believe this is the exact scenario we are about to see unfold. This is something remarkably similar to what we saw in 1983. Interestingly, that year warmed up by March. But what if there's an even better match? The pattern from 1989 shows some stunning parallels, and that's what we'll dive into in the next video. Do you remember how weird November felt? Mostly warm, but then a blast of cold hit the Northeast. What if that was just the opening act for a much wilder December? New England definitely got a taste of that winter chill, but here's the twist. this isn't going to be a simple repeat. The current weather map looks eerily similar to 1989. Why is that year so important? Because it's a blueprint for what's about to hit us. If you're a weather junkie like me and love digging into why these patterns happen, hit that subscribe button. We're going to track these winter storms together, step by step. And it's not just me saying this. The official Climate Prediction Center is on board, flagging high odds for below normal temperatures across this entire area in the next 6 to 10 days. Now, the forecast for days 8 to 14 might try to fool you into thinking it's over. And I'll admit, it does look a little less frigid. But do you really think this pattern is just going to fade away? I'm betting that's just the calm before the next major storm. At the same time, a warm pattern is locking in over the southwest and the Gulf Coast. But the real secret to this whole puzzle lies in a powerful global pattern called the Madden-Julian Oscillation. It's currently entering Phase 7 and is on a direct path to Phase 8. This is the exact trigger we've been watching for. And statistically, when these two phases align, the results are explosive for winter weather. Just look at these historical maps. This is the classic signature for a deep freeze in the central and eastern United States. And you know my rule. You have to get the cold before you can get the snow. Now, you can take this long-range model and toss it out. I get it. They can be unreliable at their best. But the signals are undeniable. A major cold snap is on the way. And for many areas, that means snow is coming too. In fact, we're already seeing it start. Let's look at the projected 32-day snow totals. Now watch what happens when I push this timeline forward. Do you see how the snow backs off from the prairies and the plains, only to concentrate all of its power right here in the east? I believe this is happening because of that MJO setup we just discussed. This pattern is the key to everything. It's locking us into a favorable cold and stormy pattern for the central and eastern U.S. The bottom line, the storms we're seeing now are not an exception. They're the new rule. This map shows your chances of seeing more than 3 inches of snow through the date right above my head. We are seeing the probability of snow just explode here along the East Coast. And that threat is now beginning to spread farther inland. And where are the biggest bullseyes showing up? Right along that powerful northwest flow corridor. But there's a catch. I'd argue this map is still showing things a little too dry for the Canadian prairies. In places like Winnipeg and stretching all the way back. It might even be too dry for Calgary. But the second that air crosses into the States, it taps into the Great Lakes moisture, and suddenly you've got a supercharged storm track. If you live in the Mid-Atlantic or the Northeast, you absolutely need to be on high alert with this type of setup. And don't miss the next part. We have to watch for a southern slider storm or two, which could dive down and hit the Tennessee Valley later in December. The ensemble guidance is pointing to not just one blast of cold, but several consecutive waves. Here's the first major wave arriving around the 2nd and 3rd of the month. This is the one that will likely fuel that major northeast storm this week. Then we might see a brief break with warm weather out west. But do you see this trough lurking northwest of Hawaii? That's a major warning sign. To me, that feature screams that a brutal cold is coming for the central and eastern United States, while the West Coast stays unusually warm. So you get this epic battle, warmth over here, frigid cold over there. And that cold is going to push all the way into the deep south by next weekend. And just look at how this northwest flow relentlessly continues all the way into the next week. What happens when this pattern finally breaks? We'll cover that in the next video, so be sure to stick around. What if the cold snap isn't ending? We're talking about a bone-chilling pattern locking in for the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th, because brand new data this afternoon shows the European model is doubling down on this cold all the way through the middle of the month. And when you really want to see the future, you look at this map. The European long-range forecast. This isn't just any forecast, it's the extended weeklies. And we're pushing the timeline all the way into December, looking at temperature anomalies, or how much colder it will be than average. Now you'll notice the colors seem to flatten out the further we go, and that's normal. But don't let that fool you, because the underlying pattern is hiding a major secret. Just look at this. The averages clearly show a massive block of cold air parked over the east, with warmth in the south. But right when you think it's settled, we start to see hints of a big change. I'm looking right around the 18th, 19th, and 20th. Could this be the moment the entire script flips? I'm wondering if we're about to see that frigid air finally take a nosedive into the west as a powerful trough digs in. And a trough digging in like that can only mean one thing: a powder keg for stormy weather, especially for the Southwest. Now that scenario actually makes perfect sense, and it might give the central United States a break. But here's the part that's just baffling. The European model refuses to let go of the cold in the east at the same time. This setup makes almost no sense to me. It looks incredibly weird. We're still pretty far out, but the overall message is crystal clear. We are looking at a sea of blue. That's cold air, folks, plastered on this map all the way into January. So, to figure out what's really going on, we have to look at the master switch for winter weather, the North Atlantic Oscillation. This is the one indicator you have to pay attention to. It's been positive, but now it's starting to trend negative. And then, right on cue, it absolutely tanks. At least, the control run of the model shows this happening right as we push into the middle and maybe even the end of December. A plunge like that could set the stage for one heck of a blockbuster storm week for the East Coast right before Christmas. But, and this is a big but, you have to be careful. Look where the median of all the models is. What this really tells me is we're in for some wild swings up and down, and that kind of volatility is the perfect fuel for major storms. Don't miss what happens next. If you've watched this far, you're serious about staying prepared, so go ahead and subscribe. And if you want to see exactly how this impacts your forecast for tonight, that brand new video is linked right here on the screen. It has the absolute latest update I've just put out. I'll see you over there.